is Ernst Rudin. He was a former Rockefeller employee, and this goes back to Munich, and I'll be getting into that in a moment. This next picture is Prescott Bush with Hitler, as he was in trouble with him for trading under the Enemies Act. And I'm not sure if this picture is actually, there was some controversy of whether it's superimposed, but there was no question of whether they were dealing with each other. The only question is whether this particular picture is authentic. The next picture is a bunch of concentration camp victims, and if you notice, they are all skinny from being starved to death while they're being examined by shrinks. This next picture is Eugene Fischer, the scumbag who was in charge of the concentration camps in North Africa, and he kept African heads. This is the victims of eugenics being hauled off, while the indifference and the indifferent of society looks on. This is Nuremberg 1934. That's Hitler and some of his closest secret society buddies. This picture is Operation Paperclip, where over 1,600 Nazis were flown to America to join our programs under the OSS, which is Strategic Services. Now we get into this next picture, and it is also a picture from Operation Paperclip. It's also from the Office of Strategic Services, the OSS. And I give you the next picture. Now if you look at how these Nazis are sitting, very similar to the Skull and Bones Masonic posture. It implies confidence and power. We go to the next picture. If you didn't believe me about the 1600, you can see there's quite a few people. Operation Paperclip again. I don't know if you can really get a good seed for all of them. Again, Operation Paperclip. This is Franz Kallmann, who was a Jew who supposedly fled during World War II to America, but really was part of Ernest Rudin's program for eugenics and carried it on to America. A real piece of work. A real piece of shit. Now that's it for the pictures from now. I would like to redirect you to the CFRs.org's own site. And we start with David Rockefeller, who is John D. Rockefeller's son. Now, it's important to note that there were several banks and foundations involved with Rockefeller, such as Chase National Bank and the Fed, of course, like the Federal Reserve in New York. It's also important to note that in 1932, Chevron made a deal, an oil deal, in Bahrain and was operating in Saudi Arabia. And then the year after, Hitler seized power and Standard Oil supplied Germany giving it the patents it required for tetra lead aviation fuel. We go on to 1936. Rockefeller, his investment bankers, including many of them linked to the Gestapo and European Nazi-linked banks, like the Dulles brothers. You see, one of the Dulles brothers became the Secretary of State, and the other became the director of the CIA. And they were linked up with Rockefeller and the Nazis and the bankers and mixed in with the fuel conspiracy because they were the lawyers. In 1937, that is when John D. Rockefeller died. And his legacy to be carried on by David Rockefeller. As you can see from the CFR's own site, the honorary chairman of the Council of Foreign Relations. And we go to the staff. As you can see, the staff, I'll briefly show you who they are, what they do. And we get to the roundtable group and groups such as that. As we go down and you look at the expertise, you know, for instance, Richard Betts, he's intelligence and U.S. defense policy, military strategy, political and military intelligence, international conflict, terrorism. These guys deal with health policies. They deal with foreign policies. They deal with national security policies. And they talk about think tanks. In fact, one of the tabs that we can click, and let's click on that tab, is think tank. And lo and behold, we have David Rockefeller's studies program, centers and initiative program. Remember, I bring up the violence initiative in my psychiatry videos. The Africa program, Asia program, we go on, global health program, we go on, U.S. foreign policy program, national security program. Then there's the fellowships. In the think tank, they're called the fellows. And they have a huge think tank.